Welcome back. The federal government says Canada is still weeks away from reopening the economy.
We will, hopefully, in the coming time, be able to loosen certain restrictions. But our health professionals and experts and all leaders understand that that has to be done at the right moment.
So how will Ottawa and the provinces reach that balance? It's Thursday. I'm here with At Issue. Chantal Hébert is in Montreal, Andrew Coyne is in Toronto, and Althea Raj is in Ottawa tonight, all of them from their home studios. So lots of questions to the Prime Minister about this week. It's being talked about in other countries, including the United States. How difficult a balance is this, and how much say does Ottawa have in making this decision? Chantal, I'll start with you.
Well, Rosie, if anyone expects Prime Minister Trudeau to walk out of that cottage, as it's called, one day and declare V-Day, that's not going to happen. Our country is larger geographically than many of the distances in Europe, and some regions of the country will probably reopen faster than others. The big issue, I'm guessing, from the point of view of the economy, is Ontario and Quebec, two provinces that at this point are certainly not around the corner of the pandemic yet.
And how much pressure will there be, Andrew, as this goes on for us to start having that conversation or knowing what that's going to look like?
The pressure is going to build for a number of reasons, one of which is the economy. We saw figures out for March where I think it was a 9% decline. So we're losing about 2% of GDP per week. The longer this goes on, the more that's going to be pressure. We're also seeing outside of Ontario and Quebec a lot of progress being made in the country. And as the case rates come down, people are going to be saying, why are we still in this degree of lockup? And thirdly, of course, we are seeing other countries, notably the United States, starting gradually, tentatively to moving towards some kind of gradual unlocking. And that's also going to put the pressure. So yes, at some point, we cannot stay in lockdown for 12 months, 18 months, or whatever it is until we get a new vaccine. Neither can we simply throw open the doors and declare victory, as Chantal says. So the tricky thing, and I'm sure people are beavering away on this, is finding a way to gradually unlock some sectors at a time, testing all the way along, making sure we're not being foolish, but also making sure that we're starting to progress towards a more open economy and a more open society so far as the science and the conditions on the ground permit.
And I wonder, Althea, what will the pressure be like, between provinces? Everyone's working together as Team Canada now, but if you see some provinces unlocking before others, how sustainable is that? I don't know.
Well, I think the question is also about interprovincial travel, because we don't have the ingredients to allow everybody to say, okay, mission accomplished. We don't have mass testing yet. And we've seen just this week, actually, in the first Japanese town to have a declared state of emergency. And they, last month, allowed business to reopen this week, have their second wave, 135 new cases in that northern Japanese town. And in part because they didn't have testing. And we don't really have mass testing anywhere. So there will definitely be pressure. That being said, the provinces are quite different with their own experience of handling the virus and also the types of cases that they have. There's no reason for Yukon and the Northwest Territories, for example, to have similar restrictions as Ontario, or never mind, maybe even New Brunswick, right? We've seen that come out this week as well. So I do think that when the public starts to, the weather starts to get nicer, people start to get restless, and they start to look at the stats where there's not that many people, like the ICU is not overwhelmed. The fear is that were the reasons why public health officials and politicians were telling us we needed to stay home. Those haven't materialized yet. So I think there is pressure to respond to people, and maybe that pressure will have to be addressed not just through politicians, but through health officials as well, doctors and nurses in hospitals, to explain to people why they need to stay home.
The other part of this that we've mentioned, and I feel like we talk about it every week, but it is the ongoing sort of issue around Donald Trump. This week suggesting that the Canada-U.S. border could open up quickly, and today, of course, laying out a plan for getting the United States back to work, even though there's indications in many parts of the country that that's nowhere near happening either. So the pressure that the U.S. as our biggest trading partner puts on all of this too, Chantal, does what? Whether it be the border or just in terms of how to manage our relationship with Donald Trump?
I think it's wise to let U.S. dynamics play themselves out as they have this week. It's one thing for Donald Trump to declare, and he proposes, but the states do dispose.
Yeah.
And I think you're seeing some evidence of that tonight in the plan that unfolded, which was not the wide open. The economy did not go back to normal at Easter. So I'm guessing the wise thing, and Canada's government has been doing that, is to allow the president to talk, but then to have discussions with adults.
It does seem, though, that I mean, you're right. That's what we're doing, but we seem to have to waste a lot of time to have those conversations with adults as they all let the president talk. Andrew.
Well, and I think the feeling would be the same in the United States. I mean, in some ways, he is no longer the president. When you see the ways in which his own administration, people simply do what they need to do, even if it's entirely contrary to what he had said. When you see states, for example, forming these pacts amongst the states as to how they'll proceed, even as the president is blustering, I'm in total control here. If you have to say it, that kind of indicates you're not. But obviously, he still controls some things, and questions of international borders, that's still something that we have to negotiate with him. But we're not about to open the borders on our side of the border anytime soon. When we look at the United States having, I think it's 2.5 times the number of cases per capita, 3.5 times the number of deaths per capita as Canada. Doug Ford put it much more bluntly than I would, saying, I don't want them here, but certainly I think people want to be very careful before we're opening the borders to any other country, unless we've got things really nailed down here for starters, and until we're ready to monitor and screen much more effectively anybody who we do let into the country.
And that border agreement, it does expire at the beginning of next week, so there is some pressure to reach some sort of agreement with them. Althea, you want to weigh in there?
Well, I don't actually think the president was arguing to reopen the border. I think he was asked a very pointed question by a Canadian French television station reporter, and he basically said only that Canada would be one of the first borders to be reopened, which I think from a Canadian point of view is something that you actually want to hear.
Sure. I
think kind of the media has run away with this and suggested that there is conflict and tension between Canada and the U.S. on this front. I really don't think there is. I don't think anybody actually wants to reopen the border.
Today, Andrew Scheer again called for in-person sittings in Parliament. Here's a little bit of what he said.
If the government wants to effectively shut down Parliament, it needs to explain why. What are the Liberals so opposed to? Transparency and accountability are in the best interests of Canadians.
So I agree. Transparency and accountability are in the best interests of Canadians. I'm not sure any journalist would disagree with that notion. I don't think it's completely honest, though, to say that the government doesn't want Parliament to return. I just don't know that we've reached a place where they agree on how to do that. They have to agree, I guess, in some way by Monday. Otherwise, the whole thing just comes back, and it seems crazy to think that that would actually happen. So do you get the strategy here at all, Chantal, of why the Conservatives are adamant to have 4 days in person in the House to question the government?
No, I don't get the strategy, and in large part because there is not a common opposition feeling that the Liberals are trying to shut Parliament down. There is a common opposition feeling that the government should make itself more accountable. And I'm guessing from where I sit that if a lot of businesses, including our own, manage to do all this without moving people to physical settings, it's kind of weird that the Conservatives would think that that is just not an acceptable way to look at things. But the 4-day-a-week thing, I don't think is totally realistic. I can't really see that they have a lot of buy-in from the other parties.
Yeah, I guess Andrew Scheer said today, and I haven't heard the opposite, that they are not ready to do virtual anything in the House of Commons until maybe May or June. So he's looking for some sort of bridge, I guess, of accountability. But 4 days to me also seems like a lot, Andrew, and I realize that's the starting point of a negotiation. But why is it so critical for them, do you think, for this to happen?
Well, there's a partisan agenda and there's a real agenda that I would subscribe to. The partisan agenda is if you're in opposition right now, it's very hard for you to get anybody to pay attention to you. Everything is going to be focused on the government of the day. The more broad and genuine agenda is there's a reason why Parliament meets in a chamber, why it isn't just on TV. It's the same reason why people go to church rather than watch it on TV or these kinds of things.
They're watching it on TV now.
No,
Yes, they're not going to church.
But there's a meaning and purpose to Parliament meeting together.
Yeah.
It is, as I've said before, it is a kind of theater, but it's necessary theater. This is how we dramatize the issues of the day. This is how we make it urgent for people. People in Parliament have known this for generations, that's part of the deal. That's how you play out the action and the controversies of the day. We can do it virtually if we have to, but if it's possible to do it in the chamber, I don't see why it's not possible to do that. I think that's preferable. So I would like to see efforts made on both fronts. Maybe we can do a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, there are committees up and running. Althea, I know you listen to a lot of them with some difficulty because they're not very audible or easy to hear.
They're better.
They're better. That's good. All right, they're sorting it out. But other than, I mean, the Conservatives do have a point that it is important for them to continue to be able to do their job and for the government to answer questions on a regular basis about decisions they're making.
Yeah, I have so much to say about this. So I think the fact is the Conservatives have felt squeezed out, not just the Conservatives, the NDP as well, have felt squeezed out of the media attention that is being given to the government. So every day the Prime Minister comes in, Rosie, you host a show for 2 hours. Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister, speaks, then cabinet ministers speak, and there is a vacuum where the opposition, who is used to getting, headlines every day from Question Period, is not getting them, which is the reason why Andrew Scheer and his family, the Conservative leader, came back to Ottawa and is now having a press conference daily where he is also fielding questions from reporters. So they feel like they're being left out. The Tories have proposed, basically, instead of coming back all 338 MPs on Monday, which is what was originally agreed to way back in, I think it was March 13th, when the House decided to suspend, thinking that, if this continued, they would just agree to push the entry of Parliament back a few weeks or months. The Conservatives have said, okay, well, we need to have Question Period, and we need to have at least 4, it was originally 4, then it seemed to be 1, now it's back to 4 in-person sessions, because a virtual Parliament cannot, the Speaker of the House believes, be up and running for another 3 weeks. Although we do know that they're looking at the UK model, and the UK model seems to be ready to roll out imminently. So they're not actually looking at the House restarting. I think that's something that we all need to understand. They're basically just looking for Question Period to restart, and they would like a session for the Prime Minister, and that's what Andrew Scheer wrote to the Prime Minister and said, I want a session where I and the other leaders can question you, and then another session or other sessions where MPs from around the country could ask ministers questions virtually. And that is something that the Bloc and the Green Party think the virtual thing they support, the in-person they don't. Elizabeth May believes that the Conservatives are basically trying to push their partisan advantages. That's the only reason why there's an in-person Question Period, that it's unsafe. The House, and I'm sorry, I'm ranting now, but the House, the new physical space is so narrow. It's much narrower than the other House. So she is concerned that they can't actually respect the physical distancing, even with 40 MPs. And the Bloc believes that if everybody is coming back to Ottawa weekly and then back to their riding, well, what's the point? Might as well stay here permanently. You're jeopardizing everybody else's health. So, I mean, who knows where things will end up going. The Liberals are trying to say we believe in accountability, but they are pushing to not have in-person sessions.
Okay, Chantal wants to.
Okay, but just to be careful here, that sometimes you should not get what you wish for. It's one thing to ask for 4 question periods a week. It's another to survive those without looking overly partisan in the current climate.
Yeah, I will just say, I actually do think asking questions in person is different than virtually. As someone that likes to ask questions of politicians standing in front of their face, I do think there's a bit of an advantage to that. And that barking came from, yes, go ahead, Andrew.
I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No.
But there's a reason why we all pay closer attention to Question Period. Why I'm talking about us, the journalists, because it's exciting. And it catches people's attention, and it makes it focuses.
I think absence makes the heart grow fonder for question period here.
Guys, I know it's tough, but you're starting to worry me, as in get a life here.
Okay, and the dog barking came from Andrew's house, just in case anyone wanted to know for sure. That's where that was. Thank you all. We'll see you next week.
All right.